Hi, you'll have to excuse me a bit today because I think I've got a cold. I've just spent a few days in the UK and I'm not feeling 100%. Anyway, let's get on. This week I've been talking a lot about the deconstruction practice, and I just need to tell you that it's not about becoming better. There is no answer to your suffering. That belief is the last illusion to fall. Psychologically, this belief is driven by the dopaminergic prediction error, the brain's tendency to experience lack whenever reality fails to match expectation. This is described by Wolfram Schultz and his reward prediction model. You feel something is missing because your nervous system expects something else. Spinoza himself named this long before neuroscience came along. In his Ethics Part 3, he stated that humans believe themselves free only because they are conscious of their actions and ignorant of the causes. You experience longing as insight. In reality, it is ignorance with a story attached. So let's talk about the mechanism. You're not suffering because you haven't improved enough. You are suffering because your nervous system learned to live in pursuit. Psychology has known this for decades. Nisbet and Wilson in 1977 demonstrated that people routinely fabricate explanations for the behaviour after the behaviour has already occurred. Michael Gazzaniga called this the interpreter function, the brain's need to narrate coherence whether it exists or not. You think you are choosing to strive, but what's actually happening is habitual affective regulation, driven by conditioning, not agency. A point reinforced by Wendy Wood's habit research, which shows that a large proportion of behaviour is cue-driven, not goal-driven. Spinoza would call this servitus, bondage, not moral failure, causal inevitability, something that is necessary. Martin Butler's negative philosophy begins here. The self you're trying to improve is not the origin of the action. It is a post hoc fantasy identity that explains what the body has already done. This is why self-improvement never ends. The narrator keeps upgrading itself. The mechanism never changes. So let's give a real-world example. Look at Prince Harry. He publicly claims healing, liberation and truth-telling. He repeatedly returns to grievance, identity, defence and narrative repair. That contradiction is not hypocrisy, it is psychology. Harry's public identity functions as an affect regulation. The story stabilises him. Remove the story and the nervous system loses its organising principle. Spinoza explained this very clearly. Affects persist until a stronger affect replaces them. Insight does not dissolve an affect. Only a competing cause does. You can only destroy something with a stronger affect in a different direction. Martin Butler would say that Harry is trapped in a fantasy self, an identity that survives by constantly re-narrating injury. You do the same thing privately. Different scale, same mechanism. Okay, so what's the consequence? Well, the consequence is that this mechanism produces repetition, not change. You accumulate insight, you acquire language, you refine explanations. Nothing changes. It's all the same. The same patterns return again and again and again. Nothing external has changed enough to change you internally. Spinoza calls this bondage precisely because understanding alone does not free you. To know a cause abstractly or intellectually is not to be released from it. Martin Butler's realism, negative philosophy, is blunt here. Insight rarely changes behaviour because insight is absorbed by the fantasy self and it's turned into status. Oh look, I've got a wonderful virtue signal. Sorry, it's not working. Psychology confirms it too when it uses cognitive insight and says that cognitive insight does not reliably predict behavioural change, particularly when habits are emotionally reinforced. Your situation stays the same. You might be in a situation where all your friends drink and you're a member of AA. So if you go back to that pub or bar and mix with the same people, you are going to drink. Whether you like that idea or not, it is going to happen. Your habits are emotionally reinforced with the group that you mix with. And that's another aspect to go into. Anyway, this was talked about by Wood and Neal in 2007. So, you don't fail to change because you resist. You fail because you misunderstand causation. This is the core error. Here is the error self-optimization cannot admit. The self you're trying to improve is a survival adaptation. It is not your essence. Attachment research by Mikulin and Shava shows that personality traits often reflect strategies for managing threat and attachment security, not stable character. It is not part of your core self. It is an adaptation to your circumstances. And you call it self. Well, that's what we do. But Martin Butler calls this the false personality. It's not false because it's honest, but it's false because it's redundant. It once worked. Once worked when you were a child. Now it governs you. And it no longer serves you. It commands you into ways that may not be your best advantage. And Spinoza would say you confuse essence with modification. You think this is me. It's simply what happened to you, not you. This is why becoming better feels endless. You're polishing a structure that exists to survive, not to be free. So let's look at my student John and his career self-sabotage. As a child, John learned that passivity kept him socially safe. He became agreeable, low-threat and popular. In adulthood, the same strategy produced ridicule, professional stagnation and contempt. Spinoza does not moralize this. There is no morality and there is no judgment. In the Ethics appendix, he observed that people despise what appears weak. This is not cruelty, it is social causation. John did not need confidence training. He needed deconstruction. The removal of a childhood strategy masquerading as personality. When the strategy stopped running, behaviour changed and status followed. Not improvement, subtraction. So we subtract and we feel loss. So why does insight feel like loss? When the false personality begins to dissolve, you do not feel empowered. You feel empty, void. Neuroscience actually can name this, and it calls it reduced default mode network activity. It's quite a mouthful, but it describes something quite fundamental. It's the quieting of the brain system responsible for self-narration. And if you want to look into it further, it's Rochelle and Brewer. You experience this as disorientation. Spinoza would call this transition from inadequate to adequate ideas. Martin Butler calls it the fantasy self losing oxygen. Most people interpret this moment as failure and rebuild the old identity. This is why this work looks threatening. There is no answer to your suffering. There is only the removal of the belief that suffering has a solution. If you read the Ethics, Spinoza ends the Ethics without consolation. Freedom is not relief, it is accuracy. And Martin Butler is even less sentimental. Reality does not care whether you feel better. It only remains when illusion stops. This practice is not about becoming better. It is about becoming less wrong. Thank you.